So for today's lecture, we'll be talking about final tips and resources for your digital poster session. So for the agenda today, we'll talk about criteria for well versus poorly designed digital poster sessions. So what makes it hard to comprehend or understand for your viewers. Some final reminders as you're doing final edits to turn in this final project. And then 10 tips for success. So we'll start with some well-designed posters. So you'll see on this poster, the summary says exactly what you did. To be imaginative, you'll have to show it visually. Usually less is more. Make it professional as you think about less is more. Develop an eye for detail. Say what's next at the end in your conclusion. So it'll be very important to focus on future work. Make sure that your font is big enough. And then at the beginning in your introduction, you're going to want to make sure that you just start with the basics. So what I took from this infographic that was designed about well-designed poster sessions is that they should all contain clear and concise information. And then another big thing so that viewers feel guided throughout your poster is to use headers for key points. This will also help with flow and organization as viewers take in and process the information on your digital poster session. You're also going to want to include text that is large enough for viewers to see. So they say that the text on your digital poster session, viewers should be able to see it from about 6 to 8 feet away. So you're going to want to make sure that it's big. Nothing is very, very tiny and hard to see on your digital poster session. Another criteria for well-designed digital poster sessions is that it needs to flow logically. So you can see on this example that it goes from introduction to the experimental, which would be your literature review most likely, maybe methods, but I think most of you will have literature reviews, the results, and then the summary and conclusion and or discussion. You'll also want to make sure that you include references on your digital poster session. And a big thing about references too is only to use a few. So on the last slide, it said at the bottom too, limit your sources to only the ones that really, really are impactful. So you should make sure on your poster session that it flows logically. And another nice thing to help it flow logically is to use only a few colors to attract viewers as they go through your digital poster session. And one thing that I really like about this example is how well the graphics and text work together. So in the introduction, it talks about the basics to the experiment. And then in the results, it actually has graphs to understand the data that this researcher / writer collected. So you want to make sure that your graphics and figures and images all work very, very well together with the text. So you shouldn't just be aimlessly throwing things into your digital poster session. You really need to think about what is something that I can add that really adds to the meaning in one of your sections. The last criteria that I have for a well-designed poster session is that you need to include the 5 basic sections. So in this section, the title needs to make a strong statement, and then you need the introduction, the literature review or methods, results, and or discussion / conclusion. So on this one, you can see for the do this section, it clearly has the title, it clearly has the summary that states results, and then the conclusions interpret the results. So you may not be doing a primary study from your Unit 2 project, but still in this poster session, you need to clearly communicate what was the main objective of that position / synthesis paper for Unit 2, and then what conclusions did you find from this paper? What recommendations would you have for general audiences? What not to do is tiny figures, and then make sure that you have even spacing throughout so readers' eyes know where to go next. And then you want all your fonts to be the same size for the text. And then you also want to make sure that each box has headings. And this will make sure that all of your ideas logically flow together. So now we're going to move on to some poorly designed posters. So you can see just from basically looking at this one that it just kind of hurts to look at it. For the example on this one, they say that it doesn't give a well background or a background that has enough information. Everything is too small. Don't announce what's coming next, just like you do in academic writing. And then you need to include some references that you use. So I say some because you don't want to include all the references that were on your Unit 2 paper because you're not including that much text. So really limit the amount that you include. And then if you use more, it will kind of make it look gaudy, and just make sure that you really play around with it to have a visually appealing poster session. So poorly designed posters usually have no clear structure. They have small graphics and text, and then they contain too much information. So it can contain too much text, it can contain too many graphics, or it can contain too many colors that make it very, very hard for the reader to take in, the reader/viewer. Another criteria for a poorly designed poster is that you have too much text, which is outside the 300 to 600 word limit. So this one, you can't even see it in this presentation because there's too much text and it just is overwhelming. So this almost looks like a scan of a textbook rather than an actual poster session. So some final reminders. I'm pretty sure I've said this at least 20 times now, but as mentioned in almost every audio presentation, you need to chunk your text and take advantage of white space. Less is sometimes more, so consider this, but also make sure that if you are trying for less is more, make sure that you review all the requirements from the assignment sheet. And then you need to also remember to emphasize a few figures or graphs on your final digital poster session that work well with your text. So as you're going into final decision making with how to lay out your digital poster session and making final edits, I have some tips for success for you. So the big one is to limit the amount of text to 300 to 400 words is more preferable than 300 to 600. So you will receive full credit on the rubric if you have 300 to 600 words, and we will review the rubric together very soon. If you only have 300 to 400 words of text, this means that you need other things to fill up your digital poster session. So remember when you're filling up to carefully pick things that really help communicate your overall message. Tip number 2 is to remember to save room for white space. So a lot of experts at digital posters say that you should have roughly 30 to 40% white space on your digital poster session. Too much text like that one that almost looked like a textbook will really just overwhelm your audience. And then again, I included this presentation that we reviewed, or this example poster session, from a presentation that we viewed earlier. So on this one, it does not have enough white space, and it just looks kind of gaudy when you look at it. Tip number 3 is just like traditional writing, you need to cite everything that is not common sense. I would recommend only putting maybe 5 sources on your digital poster session, just so you're not overwhelming your audience with too much information either. And then also don't forget to go back and review the APA citing images and figures presentation again, so you make sure that all that information is correct. Tip number 4 is do not have more than 5 figures in your digital poster session. Since your figures and graphs or charts really need to work together with your text, you need to make sure that you only have maybe 3 or 4, so you really have the time and space to make sure that they work together at communicating the same message. Tip for success number 5 is really to make sure that the title is large enough so that it easily stands out to your audience. So it really needs to pop out and people need to see it from a distance. So it's recommended that you use .80 font for your title. You also need to include your name and institution on your title. Tip number 6 is to select an appropriate color scheme. So as you can see with this example that is poor, that we've looked at many times, there's at least 10 different colors on here. So make sure that you only pick a few just so it is very easy for your viewers to understand and comprehend visually. So once again, we've reviewed this one many times. This should be an example of maybe a poster that is slightly gaudy. The next tip is to select an appropriate background. So again, with this one that is gaudy, this background is creative and thoughtful, but it makes it very difficult to read the text and understand what is going on in the poster session. The next tip that I have is to ask yourself, what can viewers take away from my digital poster session in only a few short minutes? So remember that people will really quickly pass by your digital poster session. So chances are that your audience will not spend more than 5 minutes looking at your digital poster session, besides your professor when they are grading it. The next tip, and we touched on this in the audience subunit, and it is that your digital poster session should really try to avoid unnecessary jargon. Unless you're going to a conference with a highly specialized and skilled professionals, you should avoid jargon. So for the purposes of this assignment, you should consider that all health and science undergraduate students should be able to understand your content. So that's the level of jargon and technical terms that you should aim for. So really just try to communicate your message without all the technical terms related to the topic. And then tip for success number 10 is to ask questions. Feel free to reach out this week for a phone call or a Zoom meeting. Your professor is here to help you. If you feel like this is a challenging project, make sure that you reach out for assistance. And that is all I have for you guys. Let me know if you have questions.